Hello, I'm Chuck Perry, Superintendent of Broken Arrow Public Schools, and it's my honor and privilege to serve in my hometown. And I am blessed to stand on the shoulders of the innovative educators and community leaders who came before me. They could never have imagined how the decisions that were made years ago would affect the trajectory of our schools. But the foundation they built has served our district well since 1904. As you may have heard, we are asking voters to consider a bond election in November. This is our chance to build on the foundation we've inherited. It's our chance to secure the future of our students with an investment that will not raise taxes if approved. But before I ask you to cast your vote, I want to tell you exactly what's included in this bond package. It's more than I can cover in one short video, so my team and I have created a podcast series that will launch one episode at a time over the next few weeks. I hope you'll tune in and add your voice to the conversation happening in our community. And don't forget to get out and vote on November 14th. And always remember in Broken Arrow, the best is yet to come.
Hello and welcome to the Secure Our Future podcast series. This is episode 8, our final episode of this podcast series. I'm your host, Greg Spencer, and alongside with me is Tara Thompson. Tara, how are you doing today?
Very good, other than the cold weather.
It is a little bit cold today, yeah, for sure, but don't worry. It's going to be 70 by Saturday. So, with me here today, or with us here today as well, is Superintendent Chuck Perry. Chuck.
Good afternoon.
Good to have you here. And also with us here is Deputy Superintendent. Did I say? I got that wrong, didn't I?
I think you got it right. That's right. Yes.
I felt like I was leaving something else. Dr. Karla Dyess, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Happy to be here.
Well, we are glad to have you guys here to kind of wrap up this podcast series and talk about some of the final things. So you want to start off with a rapid fire for us, Tara? You want to throw it out there?
We've been talking about the bond for a long time now, but kind of in your own words, give our listeners a 30-second summary. What is the bond? What do they need to know?
Well, I think the two things that I would like them to walk away with after listening to this is, first and foremost, there's no tax increase tied to it. And then there's a large safety and security measure in there that will make an impact on keeping not only our high schools secure with a perimeter fence around it, but also there's a lot of investment in our radios and cameras and other things across the district to make sure we maintain an environment that keeps our kids and our staff safe every day.
Dr. Dyess, how about you?
Oh, I agree completely. There's also the component of the roofs and the heating and air, which definitely does coincide with instruction because we need our students to be comfortable and safe. And so those are practical items, but they're very much needed.
Okay. And when is the vote?
It is November 14th, coming up quickly.
All right. And what happens if it doesn't pass? Let's throw that out there.
I think the big thing that 90% of our general fund, which is revenue that we receive from the state, that's tied to salaries throughout the district. We're the largest employer in Broken Arrow with 2,500 employees. And if these maintenance type issues, safety and security items, technology, we have $18 million dedicated to technology on this bond. They will have to come from somewhere else, and that somewhere else will be from our general fund, which pulls money away from the teachers that we hire. And we've made a concerted effort to keep our classroom sizes manageable for our teachers. And, classroom sizes could grow larger if it does not pass and we spend this money on these needed maintenance items and technology to keep up with ever-changing world we're teaching and living in.
And is there a required number of people that have to vote for this, or how does that part work?
That's a big thing. On the education bond issues, it's 60% majority that is needed. So every vote counts, and we need people to get out there and vote on this one.
And
for some of our younger voters, or maybe people that don't vote that often, where do they go to find out their polling locations?
If you go to our website, baschools.org, there is a link there that will take you to our bond issue that you can actually make it convenient to plug in your address, and it will tell you your polling place that you do go vote. It's a little different for this one since it's not a statewide election. So I encourage people to go there and look that up before they go.
Well, I know from our episode where we interviewed some of the students, they said that you came and spoke to them as well. Have you guys had a chance to kind of gauge the interest of getting out there and voting by our students?
I know, was it you, Ms. Thompson, that went and spoke to our students and those that have turned 18? I think it's part of that civic responsibility to get out there and vote, and we want them plugged into our school district and feel engaged by it and the whole political process. I think it's a great learning tool to encourage them to get out and vote and realize they do matter and their vote counts.
And I will give a shout out to that group. We had about 40 students from the leadership team that were there, and they hands down asked the best questions that any group have asked throughout the entire campaign.
Great.
I mean, no offense to our Chamber of Commerce and the seniors that we're talking to, but our students asked fantastic questions.
Speaking of voting, didn't you bring up that we can vote early?
That's
and
correct.
You said November 9th and 10th?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes. Now, one caution, if you are an early voter, make sure you know what polling place is, because as an early voter, my precinct is different for early voting. So again, if you intend to go out and vote early, hop online, just double check that where you're going on that day, the 9th or the 10th, is actually the polling place, because it could be a little different than the normal poll. Good to
No
know.
extra process involved for
Nope.
people with that?
Nope.
Okay. Well, let's touch on some of the topics. Let's kind of reiterate some of the things that we've talked about before, but explain why there are 4 separate questions and how that works.
Legally, how we had to break it apart, there are 4 different resolution items that people will be voting on, and each one of them are independent of one another. So question 1 is the meat of the bond issue with $48 million tied to it, and that's the safety and security component, the technology piece, the roofs, the HVAC units, and all those other items that we have, including a South Transportation Hub that will improve our transportation system that we have now. The second question deals with our buses, and we have to, again, by state law, separate those out, and that will be solely used to purchase the big yellow dogs, the buses that we see on the road every day. And then questions 3 and 4 are from our 2015 bond issue. Question 3 deals with our elementary number 17 that was slated to be built and is still slated to be built in 2025 unless this is passed. And instead of building that, we would build pods onto existing elementaries, and this would be brick and mortar pods, not modular. They will look seamless with the current buildings and increase classroom capacities across our district by being able to add more classrooms than we would be able to by just building elementary 17. And with question 4, that has to do with our aquatic center that is scheduled again to be built in 2025. It was on the bond ballot back in 2015 to be built there at the Kirkland Activity Complex next to our soccer fields, and this gives us the opportunity to build it elsewhere. There will be no less dollars allocated towards the project. It'll just be the location, because we're looking for a partnership to help with the operational costs to service and to run a pool is quite high. So those partnerships that we could join with the city or a private entity allows us to be able to build that pool aquatic center elsewhere within the city. Again, it does not affect the time frame, nor does it affect the money that is dedicated to that project.
And one thing, Mr. Perry, a question I've heard a couple times is about the third question about adding those pods onto the elementaries. We just want to clarify that we wouldn't overpopulate any elementary school. So we would consider adding offices as needed, parking spots, those types of things to the schools as well.
That's a good point.
And to be clear, we're not looking at some of our older elementaries for those. We're really looking at some of the 5 newer elementaries that are already sized to handle those larger.
Designed for those purposes.
Looking at those sites that have that overcrowding, highest enrollment, trying to keep kids in their current schools so we don't have to redistrict as many students.
That's a great point.
Okay. All right. We're going to have more pool questions here in a second, but I want to circle back to the ballot. So one question that is a little bit confusing for folks, we have posted sample ballots at our school site so people can see it ahead of the election. We've also put it on our website, but what will people actually see on the ballot when they show up to vote that day? Will it be one question? What will that look like?
It'll be 4 separate questions that they'll have to vote 4 separate times for. So you can't, there's not a vote for all, yes or no on it. It's just, you will have to go through and individually vote for those 4.
Okay.
People are looking at these, and you see we get questions and comments on some of these podcasts and the posts we do, but a lot of these items are routine expenses that are within the bond. Kind of talk a little bit about how this kind of differentiates between the routine maintenance that we have throughout the year and why we have to go after a bond issue like this.
Due to our growth back in 2015, when that bond issue was created, we were dealing with population of school growth enrollment that was far out exceeding our capacity during that time period. And that bond, and along with the 2009 bond, addressed a lot of new construction. And there were not a lot of dollars that were reserved for those routine maintenance things that come up. And there are things all the time that hit our budget with the storm this summer at Baffa that hit our roofs there and our grandstands and press box. We have what anyone could imagine with 27 plus sites and buildings. We have flooding from time to time. And, all that is wear and tear and effects on a building that you have to keep up with. So this goes above and beyond to keep a standard of excellence that we have in Broken Arrow that I think our parents and patrons expect for our students. That's something that we take great pride in is our facilities. And there's no doubt, I always like to say people make the place, but part of the culture still is you've got to have a great environment for learning to keep our, technology up to date, our classrooms up to date. We just went through this summer and updated all of our smart boards in our elementary that a lot of them weren't working properly, and the bulbs to replace them were getting quite expensive to our BenQ system, where it's like an interactive TV that people are touching. And, learning from a device such as that is a lot more conducive than the older smart boards.
Well, when you talk about just in general, the 2 bond issues that passed, the 2014-15, what was the previous one before
2009.
that? 2009. What's the number of schools that we've added since those bonded? When you think about it, I know it's a lot, not to put anybody on the spot there to try and do the math, but you talk about just the overall
footage.
growth and the amount of maintenance required by just all that we've added building wise since then is tremendous.
And not to get too technical, but either one of you might speak to the annual allocations that happen, because school finances, our CFO will hate it that I say this, very boring if you get down to it. But there are some complexities to it that the average citizen might not know about. So talk a little bit about those annual allocations so that we don't give the impression that we're just letting everything fall to pieces between bond issues.
When Mr. Perry was speaking, I was thinking about the 2015 bond. We had no idea what technology was going to look like now.
Yeah.
So at that time, we weren't all the way 1-to-1, let alone 1 to stay at the elementaries. So all of our sites now have a 1-to-1 ratio of Chromebooks. Without this type of bond passing, we could never do that. We don't purchase textbooks out of bond money, but people think, well, you have Chromebooks. Why do you need textbooks? We still have to pay for all those licenses. So we use our textbook funds for the licenses, but we still have to have all those devices for students. So that's a big thing.
And those aren't going down in price.
No, those are not going down. We buy a lot of our instructional supplies and needs out of the bond. We get an allocation annually, kind of like you were speaking about. We budget. So any of our interventions that are online for students, we purchase using those funds. Any licenses that we can purchase, we use those funds. And then the other departments do similar things. So like you said, we don't get all of our money at one time. We have to budget every year and be very mindful so that we can stay within our budget, just like a household budget. But then prices increase, but our budget doesn't increase.
Right.
And I think that's a good point of everything that people are feeling as a family with their home, and everything is 2 to 3 times the cost that it was several years ago.
I was in line at Quick Trip this morning getting some breakfast for my kids, and the lady at the checkout line was just like, what were you talking about? Like asking about the price. Like, that's how much it is. Like, you get a lot of that these days. Just
No
like
doubt.
you go to a fast food restaurant and you're, checking out at, Taco Bell and it's like $13. And it's like, how did that happen?
And I think
those
that's,
things are just constantly on the rise.
that ties back into question number 3 about adding the pods to our existing sites, because if we did build elementary 17, it's only going to hold about 300 to 400 students. Well, that max, and that was not projected back in 2015 when those dollars were set aside for that site, and we would be looking at a 500, 600 plus elementary, and so these.
And then you got to hire all new staffing with those
Absolutely.
things. And,
So I think just the cost of everything really will be, impacted by this bond issue, whether it passes or not. I guess what we spend on those items will be impacted.
So you said you wanted to go back to the pool later.
Yes,
we're
yeah.
later now.
People are really interested in this one, and they have a lot more questions before the vote. So one of the things that we've seen in some of our thought exchange and then on Facebook is, can you explain a little bit more what would the relationship look like with the city? Who owns the pool? Who operates it? How is it beneficial to the taxpayers to engage in a partnership like that rather than the school just building it itself? So any details you can share about that, I think they would appreciate.
We talked with several school districts who run aquatic centers as part of their school district, and they said operational costs can be anywhere from $600,000, $700,000, $800,000 a year with the chemicals and what it takes to heat and cool a building such as that. And it's something our swim program definitely deserves, and it's long overdue in this community. But at the same time, it is something where we'd love to find some revenue generating pieces of it with being accessible to our community and swim programs, club swim programs across the Tulsa area. And so to do that, we will need somebody to help partner with us and to run that on a daily basis above and beyond what our swim program would use. So that partnership, such as the city, if we built that over at Elam Park on the south part of town, that would allow us to, use some of their, resources and manpower to help us make this something that can not only be used for the school but also for the entire city. And I think I see it being open from early morning till late in the evening on a daily basis.
Yeah, I mean, the last thing you want to do with a facility of that size and cost is to just
Let it sit.
be limited in what you're doing with it.
And this has been a fairly recent idea. Is that fair to say too?
That is correct. And even if this question 4 passes, it will not necessarily mean we build it off-site from Kirkland Activity Complex. It just gives us the option to do that since we're still several years away from having those monies available. It gives us some options to plan. So it's not set in stone that we'd build it off-site.
And it will not impact the amount that's dedicated to the aquatic center or the timeline.
That is correct. We want to build a great facility for our swim program that they can be proud of and use to practice in really year-round. Our swimmers are a very dedicated group that they are a unique athlete, and that program has unique needs. And as a school district, I think this is a missing piece of the puzzle that, again, probably should have been here much earlier, but the time is right now, and wherever we built it, it'll be a first-class facility.
And I can speak from experience on days when we've tried to do media days there and even live stream from the existing facility that they use. It's very crammed for the amount of kids and then the people you try to fit in there. So All right, Tara, do you want to talk about any final thoughts in terms of, obviously we've reiterated to people that this will not raise any taxes, but I know that we sometimes get some questions about if it doesn't pass, could it possibly lower taxes?
Absolutely.
Is that anything you want to touch on?
Yes, because we do want to be fully transparent with all the information that we're putting out there. My response to that thus far, whenever we get those questions, is yes, your school taxes, your school property taxes could drop. It's difficult to say person to person because it depends a lot on where they live. Yeah. Do they live in city limits? Which county do they live in? Because we straddle both Tulsa and Wagner counties in this district. So I hesitate to answer it per person, just not knowing their background. But theoretically, if the bond did not pass and we did not replace those bonds that were expiring, then yes, their school property taxes could go down. So really what voters are having to consider when they go to the polls is that $2 to $4 that I might save on my property taxes, is that worth not investing in the schools, or should I, go ahead and invest those dollars back into the school? That's a difficult question to answer. Yeah. Individual like that, but there are plenty of resources out there where you can go and look and see how your property taxes are currently being affected and would be affected if it went away.
Well, I appreciate the transparency of that, and to know that we did look at even raising millage rates and putting this out to vote where it would potentially increase taxes, and we were very cognizant of the economic times we're living in, the inflation that families are dealing with, and we wanted to keep it level where it's at. And we have historically just had great support from our patrons with the bond issues, and something that we're very proud of in Broken Arrow. And again, that's why we need people to get out and vote.
And if people wanted to dive deeper in some of the financial records for past bond issues, all that's also on our website. We've got
link will be right there.
Not only in the comprehensive annual report, which is audited by an external group, but then also we're legally required to publish financial transparency statements every month on our website. So if you're a person who likes numbers or need something to lull you asleep at night, I would highly recommend those financial reports. And I apologize to our finance team who lives and breathes that stuff.
And they're really good at it.
Yes, they are.
And we have a podcast with Natalie on it back at the beginning of the series if you want to listen to her thoughts. But to wrap it up here, and Karla, we'll start with you. People should vote on November 14th because
it's going to have a direct impact on student learning and safety, for sure.
Chuck, same question for you.
I would say that it is a situation that not only impacts our students, but our entire community. And with strong school districts come increased property values. There's a safety aspect in it. And with our city, we want to put out a workforce that is beneficial to this area. And I think it helps the whole, even if you don't have students in the district currently. I think it's an important thing that you're engaged and tied into your local school district, because it does have an impact on our community as a whole.
Tara, any final thoughts from you?
Honestly, at this point in the bond issue, I'm ready to just vote and let's get this thing over with. Yeah. I'm tired.
Well, we'd like to thank everybody for being here, and really everybody that joined us on all these episodes. If you missed any of them, they're very easy to find. Like I said, the link is right here to go back and watch any of them. And on top of that, there's just a ton of information that you could possibly want. You can accuse us of a lot of things, but you can't accuse us from withholding information. But it's all out there. Go out and vote November 14th, and we appreciate you guys for watching it. We appreciate you guys for joining us. And that's the final episode of the Secure Our Future podcast series. So we will not see you next time, but be sure and watch all the other ArrowVision Podcast Network podcasts. Thank you, guys.